Welcome to the ARM School programme. This video is taken from our teacher training programme on edX.org called Teaching with Physical Computing. Whether you're new to teaching computing or a specialist, this programme will set you up on a path to becoming an expert in delivering technology-enabled project-based learning in the classroom. This module introduces the ASP schema and describes how we structure our resources to keep project-based learning simple and effective.
In this module, we will look at some examples of how physical computing can be used in the classroom using freely accessible resources provided by the ARM School programme, ASP. We will explore how the resources can be used to shape learning experiences and how they can be used to spark a lifelong engagement with computing. We will look at examples of how ARM School programme's resources are structured, why they are structured this way, and how they can be applied in a number of different ways depending on your context. The resources have been designed to be flexible so that they can be used as a single lesson or activity or as a whole curriculum. All ARM School programme's projects are made around a set of headings which lay out the project and set expectations. These headings are the core of the ARM School programme's approach and are supplemented in various ways to help delivery in different contexts. For example, classroom-based resources will include detailed lesson plans, slide decks and worksheets that guide the learner through the headings. The same headings are used in standalone projects where only necessary scaffolding is provided. In ARM School programme's books, a more didactic approach is used, and learners are guided through the task in much more detail. These headings provide a consistent and flexible approach to delivering project-based learning. You will probably recognise these headings as they are also used throughout this course. A good example of a bank of engaging contexts are the Sustainable Development Global Goals. These are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The SDGs were set in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly and are intended to be achieved by the year 2030. They include goals such as ending hunger, gender equality and climate action, all with many specific sub-goals which project-based learning projects can be based on. We will start by looking at how one of the SDGs was used as a context and how the ARM School programme schema is used in a project called the Oil Spill Cleaner Upper, where learners are tasked with developing an autonomous boat drone that can be used to clean up oil spills. Getting started. This is where the project is introduced and the context is laid out. This is a vital step to ensure the learners buy in to the problem being solved. Ensuring the context is relevant and engaging is key here, and this section needs to ensure the learner understands why they are doing what they are being challenged with. The context in our example is SDG 14, life underwater and the need to quickly clean up ecological disasters, such as oil spills, is self-evident, and there are many images of oil-soaked wildlife and habitats to engage learners. In this section we start to introduce the narrative for the project and constraints, as these are vital to ensure the project is both achievable and that the learners are focused on a consistent problem. It is important to introduce the problem as well as narrow down the problem set to ensure learners are solving the problems intended, as these are designed to be achievable by the age range and be solvable using computational techniques the learners should be familiar with. A common problem is learners misinterpreting the problem or being too ambitious with their solution, so tempering their ambitions is important to ensure they do not disengage later and that they can complete what they start in the given time. This narrowing down of objectives is formalized in the next section called the success criteria. Success criteria. These are a list of SMART objectives for the learner based on the context set out in the Getting Started section. These are essentially the learning outcomes and the deliverables for the project, but are presented as a checklist for the learner, which also helps in assuring learners stay on task and can be even used to quickly assess their progress. Learners should be frequently reminded to compare their designs and solutions against these criteria. Some success criteria can be very specific, and others can be more open-ended to allow for more creative problem-solving. However, they should be constrained enough so that all learners have a consistent experience. The success criteria can also cover the practical building elements, which often form part of the ARM School program's projects. The success criteria are the primary lever in differentiating the project, other than what support material is provided. Project-based learning, such as this, can be used by K-12 learners as well as undergraduates by just providing more scaffolding for younger learners and adding in more complex success criteria for older learners. Often the context can remain unchanged. Now we have introduced the project and the success criteria, learners can begin the project. This is where the different delivery models diverge in what they provide. The project in our example was designed for middle school learners, 11 to 14-year-olds, and so we provided some scaffolding to get them to think about the inputs, processes and outputs, or IPO, model. This model helps learners make the link between the code and the real world, and neatly shows how the physical computing elements provide inputs, processing and outputs, and how these all need to work together to meet the success criteria. ProTip. These appear multiple times in the resources where appropriate and are essentially a tip, example or common tripping up point that should be highlighted. These are created when the projects are being tested and the learner's attention needs to be drawn to a particular element or practical consideration to avoid the project derailing. In our example, the learner is provided with some guidance on how to build the solution and also how to wire together the microbit and the motors. This type of scaffolding for the physical building elements is often needed, as typically learners do not learn about electronics until later in the curriculum, and this can quickly disengage learners if they do not know how to wire the components together, however simple it may seem. These scaffolding resources also allow you to guide the learners through any coding that is needed. Typically, this may just be some starter code or blocks, and the learner is then expected to complete the rest independently. This is a crucial differentiation point, as some learners will not need any support here and others will need lots of guidance. In the example, we provide just the first few steps of the algorithm, and then learners can extrapolate this to solve the full problem. Stretch tasks. These tasks should be designed to be an extension of and more challenging than the base level success criteria. They serve as an additional upward differentiation and add more challenge and complexity to the task. These are designed to stretch the learners by applying more contextualized complexity to improve the solution. Whilst these are generally over and above the typical expectations of the project, they afford even the most advanced learners further challenge. Final thoughts. This section serves as a wrap-up and look back at the project's content with reflections on it and how it relates to the wider world. This should summarize the content and draw together the various threads, as well as asking more open-ended humanities-style questions for learners to reflect on. These can be used as parting thoughts by the teacher at the end of the lesson, or even as homework questions. This flexible schema allows learners to easily engage with complex projects and be confident in what and why they are doing it. Learners' needs are met through the judicious use of the provided scaffolding material, and the projects can be done in groups or in isolation. Innovation Days. One of the easiest ways to introduce project-based learning is with an Innovation Day. These are typically a collapsed timetable day where a year group or class spends a whole day on a given project. Introducing PBL in this way highlights its benefits whilst ensuring it is manageable to implement. Most of the ARM School program's projects can be used for Innovation Days with only minor adjustments, depending on the age and ability of the learners involved. Innovation Days can be easily themed to suit a whole school context, and can also be made competitive by adding in an assessed, scored element using the supplied marking rubric that scores various facets such as creativity, teamwork, complexity, design and communication.
To learn more, head over to edX.org and search for project-based learning and enrol for free.